Hey there, welcome to the second video. This one slightly cryptically relates to the expression woman of transgender experience. What's that all about? Isn't it a very long, complicated, multi-syllable way of saying transgender woman? I can understand why you would say that. I've said that to myself in the past. It's an expression I first came across probably a couple of years ago. And at the time when I was watching YouTube videos of other girls going through transition and living their lives, I thought exactly that. I thought that's a complicated way of saying transgender woman. And it didn't appeal to me at the time. But in my own way, for my own reasons, I've come to really now fully embrace that as actually it's essential to who I am. So I probably ought to explain why and how that's come to be and why it's such a significant mindset shift. Well, firstly, I guess in the last video we talked about gender dysphoria. Again, not every transgender person has gender dysphoria, but a lot of us do. For some it's a very, very extreme thing, for others it's rather mild. My gender dysphoria for the first 58 years of my life was relatively subtle. It was where I permanently dissociated from life, from emotion, from connection with myself as much as with other people. And in a very, very simplistic way, gender dysphoria is the stress or the tension or the disconnect that exists within a person who is born one way, in my case a man, but who identifies as or has to live as the other, in my case a woman, or indeed there's non-binary and all sorts in the middle as well. So dysphoria, so I've talked about what my dysphoria was for the first 58 years of my life. And you also know from the last video that I've lived with a lot of joy, I've lived with a great deal of confidence, I'm extremely happy and sure of who I am, and I'm extremely happy I will never live as a guy ever again. But yet, that doesn't mean that my dysphoria fully disappeared. I kind of developed a new form of dysphoria, deep joy, and that dysphoria was the disconnect between the mind and the heart and the soul and the joy I feel living as a woman. This whole part of me was saying, woman, 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 you have to live this way. This is the only way you can be happy. This is the only way you can be joyful. This is the only way you can be confident in life. And I absolutely know that for a fact because my life changed overnight the minute I'd started being Maria. But nonetheless, the dysphoria that I continued to feel was that there was somebody in my head, my logical side, who was busy telling me from time to time that I got the body of a guy. And that therefore the kind of the construct in my head, in a very colloquial kind of way, was I was a guy who thinks he's a girl. I'm a bloke who's transitioning, becoming a woman. And so the problem with that dynamic is it emphasizes to a certain extent my masculinity, my male side, and it sets up a constant struggle between the two because it means that in part for that dialogue to continue I could never truly really accept that I was actually a woman. And for me that's absolutely fundamental to who I am. How can I not really believe I'm a woman? And I can't believe I'm a woman if I've got this voice in my head going male body. And that was my dysphoria in this battle. Even despite the joy and the confidence I portray inside the house and to all my friends and neighbours, that dysphoria, that problem, that battle continued up until the last week or two, since when I started to embrace the term a woman of transgender experience. And how, therefore, did I resolve that? How did I get that battle sorted? How did I land that conversation in my head? Well, I think I touched in the last episode on some research I've been doing. So this is another way of saying I'm a bit slow sometimes to join the dots because the research I'd done was some months ago. The research included the fact that transgender people are as they are for biological and genetic reasons. It's also true that in my case, my brain is more feminine than a typical male brain. And in studies of transgender brains, that's been commonly found to be the case. If someone was born a man, they'll have a brain more aligned to a female brain and vice versa. And so despite having that knowledge, I was kind of sitting over here in sort of a random bubble over here saying research done, this is how you can deal with transphobes, tell them it's all biological, it'll go away. But I somehow I let it sit over there on a shelf, and I didn't bring it into my life. So yeah, I was slow and stupid. Now, how I've managed to get it into my life is now I fully understand that I am actually biologically and genetically a woman, albeit with the wrong genitals, for example. That mindset shift has meant I've gone from a place where I would occasionally say I'm a bloke who thinks he's a woman, to now fully understanding that I am a woman, just with the wrong bits. And so that's enabled me to make what is for me a massive shift, to move from transgender woman, which emphasizes transgender first, moving from male to female in my case, to being a woman first of transgender experience, because clearly I have some biological bits that most women aren't born with. And the first 58 years of my life is what gives me the transgender experience. But it doesn't mean I'm not a woman. The science tells me that, science proves that. And that mindset shift is why that expression, woman of transgender experience, is now so important to me, and it's what defines me. It emphasizes female first as opposed to transgender brackets male first. And that's brought me a lot of peace. Yeah, I'm disappointed it took me so long to get there. But nonetheless, I got there. And I already feel a much greater sense of calm and a much greater sense of confidence, because I finally got that logical, emotional battle in my head resolved in favour of the fact that I'm a woman based on scientific research. Using also the expression woman of transgender experience as opposed to transgender woman is also quite useful in a way, because to constantly label yourself transgender woman, transgender woman, transgender woman, as I say, kind of re-emphasizes over and over again the transgender nature of the person, as opposed to the fact that they are a woman first. And moving from being a transgender woman to being a woman of transgender experience, as I say, emphasizes the fact that I'm a woman first and foremost, albeit with some bodily bits I'm going to do something about through surgery. So that's the background as to why I've changed how I express or label myself. It's not a simple thing. It's come probably too late, or it's come rather much later than it should have done. But nonetheless, it's a significant shift in my life, where I now am fully believing in who I am in every way, shape or form. And so I'm a lot happier, which is just as well because I'm just about to do surgery in a couple of days. So not knowing who I was or not accepting who I was before surgery would be a bit of a problem, but I don't have that problem anymore. I'm now fully bought into the fact that I'm a woman of transgender experience. So I hope that's been useful. I'm sure there will be, well, I know there are other women to whom some of those points will be relevant, but it's also useful to understand, I think, for friends and neighbours out there who are watching this, to understand that just because someone is very, very happy, just because they are really confident and joyful in how they live, it doesn't necessarily mean they've resolved all their issues. The stress and the tension of someone going through, someone like me going through what I'm going through is significant. And just because I've got a smile on my face doesn't mean I've got all my issues sorted. For now, I think I got all my issues sorted. So I'm really, really happy. Hope that's been helpful to you in some way, shape or form. If not, send me a message, and if there's anything you'd like me to pick up on other videos, I will do. Otherwise, I'll see you somewhere the other side of surgery. Okay, take care now. Bye.